My house has always been my fortress. I built it with my own hands when I was 35, and since then, every brick, every beam has borne the imprint of my life. Now, at 78, I look at the cracked paint on the living room ceiling and think that we have both, me and the house, stood the test of time. My name is Winthrop Haddock. I'm a widower, a former civil engineer, the owner of 3 houses in Lawndale, and a man who is considered a burden by his own family. It's funny how things have turned out. I've worked my whole life to make sure they don't need anything, and in the end, I've become a relic of the past, an old-fashioned old man who is tolerated only because of his money. The phone rings as I finish my usual breakfast of blueberry oatmeal and strong tea. My daughter's name pops up on the screen. Isolde calls rarely, usually when she needs something. I take a deep breath before answering. "Daddy, do you remember that today is Lloyd's birthday?" Isolde's voice has the usual note of annoyance, as if I'm already guilty of something. "Of course I remember," I answered, though I had forgotten it was my son-in-law's birthday. "Give him my congratulations. We are waiting for you at 6 o'clock in the evening, and, Dad," she pauses and I already know what comes next. "Could you bring that whiskey you brought last time?" Lloyd was very complimentary about it. It was 150 pounds a bottle, but it's not even about the price. "Of course," I said. "Anything else?" "No, just don't be late as usual." I'm never late. On the contrary, I always arrive 15 minutes early. But Isolde has created in her head the image of an irresponsible old man, and it's impossible to change her mind. After the call, I sit for a while, looking out the window at my well-tended garden. My gardener, Earl, is now pruning the rose bushes. He comes twice a week, and we sometimes talk about the weather and plants. Earl knows about my family. It's hard to hide things from a man who has worked for you for 15 years. "Is it Mr. Lloyd's birthday today?" he asks when I come out on the terrace with a cup of tea. "Yes," I reply. 48. "Are you going to give him expensive alcohol again?" There's no judgment in Earl's voice, just a statement of fact. What else would I give to a man who thinks I'm an old man who's out of date? I shrug. Earl shakes his head. "They don't appreciate you, Mr. Haddock. I've seen it for years. I'm not denying it. What good is denying the obvious? My daughter married Lloyd Bryce 27 years ago. He was a junior analyst for an insurance company and she was pregnant with their first child. I helped them with a down payment on a house, paid for a lavish wedding, and set up an account for a future grandson or granddaughter. Lorraine was born in April, a small screaming girl with a mop of dark hair and a stubborn temper. Now, Lorraine is 29, and she lives in the house I bought for her 4 years ago in an upscale Lawndale neighborhood. A brick 3-story mansion with a garden and a 2-car garage. I deeded the house to myself, an old habit of keeping things under control. "It's just a formality," I said at the time. "The house is yours, but it's more secure this way." In fact, something inside me, some sixth sense, told me to be safe. At the store, I pick out a whiskey for Lloyd and stop at the gift wrap department. What to buy the man who thinks I'm a burden? Every year it's the same question, and every year it's the same answer, something expensive and impersonal. Expensive liquor, expensive cufflinks, expensive watches. Money is the only language we use to communicate. Isolde and Lloyd's house, a 3-story townhouse in a quiet suburb of Lawndale, was also my gift. I hadn't deeded it to myself, I put it in their names. Maybe that was my mistake. Giving too much, asking too little in return. When I pull up to their house at exactly 15 minutes past 6, there are several cars in the driveway. Lloyd always has a lot of birthday guests, co-workers, neighbors, golfing friends. I park on the street, grab a bag of whiskey, and walk to the front door. "Dad!" Isolde opens the door with a strained smile. "You're early." "Hi, honey." I kiss her cheek. She smells of expensive perfume and wine. "Happy birthday to Lloyd." "He's in the backyard with guests." She takes the package from me without looking inside. Knows I brought exactly what was asked for. There are about 20 people in the living room and backyard. I recognize some of Lloyd's colleagues, neighbors, a couple of Isolde's friends from her book club. They all say a polite hello to me, but no one lingers for conversation. I'm just Isolde's old father to them, a relic from another era. Lloyd is standing at the grill, flipping steaks, a glass of beer in his hand. He's 48, but he looks younger, trim, tanned, with a fashionable haircut and a brand-name shirt. "Winthrop." He spots me and waves. "Glad you could make it." His tone says otherwise. In 27 years, we've never changed to you, even though I've suggested it many times. To him, I'm always Winthrop, never Dad or father-in-law. "Happy birthday, Lloyd." I hold out my hand and he shakes it, keeping the grill tongs in his other hand. "Thank you. Isolde said you brought that whiskey?" "Yeah, she took it away." "Great." He nods and goes back to the steaks. "Get yourself a drink, it's all on the table." I walk over to the drinks table and pour myself some soda. I quit drinking alcohol 10 years ago when I started having heart problems. No one in the family seems to remember or care. "Grandpa?" Lorraine's voice comes from behind me and I turn around. My granddaughter walks toward me with a glass of wine in her hand. She's beautiful, tall, slender, with dark hair in an elegant bun. She's wearing a simple black dress that I'm sure cost as much as my monthly pension. "Lorraine," I smile at her. "How are you doing?" "Everything's great." She fixes her hair in a gesture that reminds me of her grandmother. "My Eleanor died 15 years ago, but I still see her in the little things, the way Lorraine tilts her head, the way Isolde presses her lips together." "How's your arthritis?" "I don't have arthritis. I had heart surgery 3 years ago, but I've never had arthritis." "Better," I reply. "And how's your job?" "Just a crazy week." She takes a sip of wine. "We have a big client, a pharmaceutical company. We're launching a new campaign for them. Lorraine works at a PR agency. I've never understood exactly what she does, but she always talks about it like she's saving the world." "The house isn't a hassle?" I ask. "No, it's fine." She waves it off. "Although, the roof is leaking a bit after those heavy rains. I had to call in some repairmen." "You could have called me," I say. "I would have helped." Lorraine laughs. "Grandpa, no offense, but you're 78. What kind of roof can you fix? Until I was 55, I personally supervised the construction of skyscrapers and bridges. I know more about roofs than any repairman she could call, but to her, I'm just a feeble old man." "I could at least do some consulting," I say, "or pay for the repairs." "I've already paid for everything, don't worry." She pats me on the shoulder like I'm a child. "Oh, I need to talk to Teresa. I'll see you later." And she walks away, leaving me with an unfinished soda and the feeling that I'm an extra at this celebration of life. Dinner goes on as usual. Lloyd sits at the head of the table. Isolde fusses with the dishes. I sit at the end of the table, next to some colleague of Lloyd's who spends most of the time on the phone, apologizing every 5 minutes. No one pays attention to me except when they need to pass the salt or sauce. After dinner, everyone moves to the living room for toasts and gifts. Lloyd opens my gift, whiskey, and thanks me with a memorized phrase. Other gifts follow: books, ties, store certificates. Nothing special, but each gift is accompanied by sincere smiles and hugs. My gift, the most expensive of all, elicited the scarcest reaction. As I'm about to leave around 9 p.m., Isolde walks me to the door. "Thanks for coming, Daddy," she says. "Lloyd was glad to see you. We both know that's not true." "Of course it is," I reply. "Give him my best wishes again." She nods, and I can see that her mind is already back to the guests, to the real celebration that will begin when the old man leaves. On the way home, I think about how it all came to this. When did my children and grandchildren start seeing me only as a source of money and an inconvenient old man? I built a successful business from the ground up, creating a construction company that erected half the commercial buildings in downtown Londale. When I sold it 10 years ago, the deal was a seven-figure sum. I had provided my family with everything: homes, education, travel, a hassle-free life. And what did I get in return? Fake smiles and obligatory holiday visits. At home, I sit in my chair by the fireplace and pull out an old photo album. Here's Isolde on graduation day, proud and happy. Here's Lorraine, 5 years old, on my shoulders at the zoo. Here's Eleanor and me on our 30th wedding anniversary. She was already sick then, but smiling as if we had forever ahead of us. When did things change? Maybe when Eleanor died. She was always the link between me and the children, smoothing over the rough edges, organizing family dinners and holidays. Or maybe when I sold the company and became just a retiree rather than a successful businessman. The phone rings, interrupting my musings. It's Lorraine. "Grandpa, thanks for the whiskey for Daddy." Her voice sounds a little tipsy. He's very pleased. "I'm glad," I reply. "How was the party?" "Great. Everyone's already gone, but it was super fun. You left early." "I was tired," I say, but really I was just feeling overweight. "Yeah, at your age you have to go to bed early," she giggles, and I hear Isolde's voice in the background saying something to her. "Oh, Mom's asking if you could babysit Byron next week. She has an important meeting at the club and no one to leave the dog with." Byron is Isolde's poodle, spoiled and ill-mannered. The last time I sat with him, he chewed up the leg of my antique table. "Of course," I answer automatically. "When do you need to be here?" "Thursday, 11 o'clock in the morning. You're the best, Grandpa." "Bye." And she hangs up without waiting for my answer. I look at the phone in my hand and think about the fact that I've once again agreed to something I don't want to do. Why do I never say no? Why do I always go along with their demands, even when they treat me like a servant? Maybe because I'm afraid of being all alone, or because I hope that one day they will appreciate everything I do for them. In the mirror above the fireplace, I see my reflection: gray hair, wrinkled face, tired eyes. I look my age, and there's no shame in that. I've earned every one of those wrinkles, every gray hair. I've built a successful life, built a family, provided for their future. But somehow that's not enough. To them, I'll always just be an old man who no longer fits into their glossy world. I close the photo album and stare at the fire in the fireplace. It's time to stop clinging to illusions. My family won't appreciate me anymore, no matter how much money I spend, no matter how many houses I buy, no matter how much help I give. Maybe I should reevaluate my relationship with them, start setting boundaries, stop being a bottomless wallet and an ever-available helper. I can't change their attitude toward me, but I can change my attitude toward the situation. And maybe it's time to start doing that before it's too late. Tuesday morning greets me with the familiar ache in my lower back and the noise of my neighbor's lawnmower. Ashton, a young community college professor, always mows the lawn at 7 a.m. sharp on Tuesdays, regardless of the weather or the time of year. I don't mind at my age. Early rising is becoming the norm, not the exception. I eat breakfast on the veranda, looking out at my garden through the glass fogged by hot tea. The roses are blooming especially lush this year. Eleanor would approve. Roses were her passion. The phone vibrated on the table, a message from Lorraine. Unusual. She usually preferred to call, especially when she needed something. "Hi, Grandpa. I'm having a party this Saturday. Chamber party, just close friends and co-workers. We'd love it if you could drop by." It starts at 7 p.m. I reread the message several times, trying to figure out what's behind this unexpected invitation. Lorraine never calls me to her parties. I've only been to her house a few times in the past 5 years, and that was strictly for business reasons, when I needed to sign some papers or when there was a communication problem. I type back, "Thanks for the invitation. Celebrating something?" The answer comes almost instantly. "Just a get-together with friends. Nothing special. Come if you want. If you want, I can tell at once how sincere the invitation is. I put my phone away and look at the garden. Something's not right here. Lorraine isn't the type to do something for nothing, without an ulterior motive. Maybe she needs money, or does she want to discuss the roof repairs she mentioned at Lloyd's birthday party? I decide to call Isolde. Maybe she knows what's going on. Daddy? Her daughter sounds surprised, as if she wasn't expecting a call. Is something wrong? No, just wondering if you know anything about Lorraine's party this Saturday. There's a pause on the other end of the line. Oh, that, Isolde finally replies. Yes, she mentioned it. She'll have some important people from work there. It seems she wants to impress the new director. And what does that have to do with me? Another pause, longer than the last. You see, Papa. Isolde's trying to find the right words. Lorraine wants to show that she has, stable backup, family support and all that. Their agency appreciates that. So I'm just for decoration, I say flatly. Dad, don't be like that. Isolde's voice has a familiar note of irritation in it. Lorraine just wants you to be a part of her life. That's a good thing, isn't it? I know that tone all too well. It's the way Isolde used to talk to me when she asked me to pay for her and Lloyd's second honeymoon in the Maldives, or when they needed a new car, or when Lorraine's private school raised tuition. Of course, I agreed. It's just weird to get an invitation like this. You're going, aren't you? There's a slight concern in her voice. This is really important to Lorraine. I'll think about it, I answer, and say goodbye. After the conversation, I sit on the veranda for a long time, staring at the empty cup of tea. So Lorraine wants to use me as a prop for her career game. Maybe I should say no. What have I got to lose? But somewhere deep inside, there's a hope that maybe this is a chance to mend my relationship with my granddaughter. Maybe if I show myself at my best, she will see me not only as an old grandfather with a wallet, but also as a man with experience and knowledge. By evening, I decide I'll go. It won't get any worse, and refusing will only give Lorraine an excuse to accuse me of not supporting her at an important time. The rest of the week goes by with the usual worries. Thursday, I sit with Byron, Isolde's poodle, as promised. To my surprise, the dog behaves himself, perhaps finally starting to mature after 5 years of outrageous behavior. Friday, I have lunch with Murray, my old friend and former CFO of my company. We talk politics, healthcare, and how Lawndale has changed in recent years. I hear your granddaughter is having a party, Murray says, buttering a bun. My Evelyn is friends with a girl from her agency. And what have you heard? I ask, suddenly interested. Some big shot from London is coming. They say they're going to decide who gets promoted to creative director. Murray shrugs. Evelyn said your granddaughter's looking forward to it. That's it. Now the picture is clearer. Lorraine is vying for a promotion and wants to impress the brass. And well, I guess I'm supposed to play the caring grandfather who gave her a fancy house to live in, proof that she's successful and wealthy. You know, Winthrop, Murray looks at me with a shrewd eye, you allow your family too much. You always have. What do you mean? You know, he takes a bite out of his bun. When we worked together, you were always a tough negotiator. Never gave in to contractors, never let clients get on your back. But with your family, he shakes his head. With your family, you're like soft wax. They mold you into whatever they want. His words hurt me, but I can't help but agree. They're my family, Murray. So what? He raises his eyebrows. Family is supposed to respect you, not use you. I can't find anything to answer, and we change the subject. But Murray's words continue to echo in my head all evening and the next day. On Saturday, I start getting ready for the party hours in advance. I pick out a suit, not the newest, but a well-fitting navy blue suit I bought for a company anniversary party 3 years ago. The shirt is white, the tie a pinstripe. I don't aspire to look fashionable. That would be ridiculous at my age. But I want to look dignified. At 6 o'clock in the evening, I order a cab. I could drive my car, but I decide that a cab would be more convenient. I wouldn't have to look for parking, and I could have a glass of wine if offered. Lorraine lives in North Lawndale, in a neighborhood that in the last 10 years has transformed from an ordinary suburb into a trendy place for young professionals. The house I bought for her is a 3-story red brick mansion with white window frames and a manicured front yard. It cost a lot, almost £1 million to be exact. When I signed the papers, the estate agent had suggested I put the house straight into Lorraine's name, but something stopped me. Now, I'm glad I listened to my intuition. The cab stops at the gate and I see the house is brightly lit, and there are lots of cars in the driveway and along the street. A chamber party, my ass. I pay the cabbie and walk toward the house. The front door is ajar, music and laughter coming from inside. I press the bell, but without waiting for an answer, I decide to go in. The hallway is littered with shoes and filled with guests' outerwear. I carefully hang my coat on a loose hook and walk toward the sound of voices. The spacious living room, which I remember almost empty when I bought the house, is now filled with at least 30 people. Fancy furniture is arranged to create islands for socializing. On the walls, which used to be just white, now hang abstract paintings in expensive frames. In the center of the room is a low table with snacks and drinks. I look for Lorraine, but I don't see her among the guests. I do notice a few familiar faces, a couple of Lorraine's neighbors, whom I've met a couple of times when I've come to help with the garden, and Fern, Lloyd's buddy who was at his son-in-law's birthday party. "Mr. Haddock." Fern comes up to me with a glass in his hand. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Lorraine invited me," I reply. Sure. He nods with a slight smile, as if I'd said something funny. "It's a great party, isn't it? Your granddaughter knows how to entertain guests." I nod, not knowing what to say. Fern continues to talk about some mutual acquaintances, the weather, a new restaurant in downtown Lawndale. I listen half listening, still looking for Lorraine. Finally, I spot her. She's standing in the far corner of the room, talking to a tall man in an expensive suit. Lorraine looks gorgeous in a simple black dress and her hair styled. She gestures animatedly, and the man listens intently, nodding occasionally. I apologize to Fern and head toward my granddaughter. She notices me when I'm almost there, and there's a look of annoyance. But it immediately changes to a smile. "Grandpa!" She hugs me, and I can smell the expensive perfume. "I'm so glad you could come," I promised, I reply. "Barrage, this is my grandfather, Winthrop Haddock." Lorraine introduces me to the man. "Grandfather, this is Barrage Daltrey, creative director of our London office." "A pleasure, sir." Barrage shakes my hand. His handshake is firm, his gaze appraising. "Lorraine's told me a lot about you." "She has?" I can't hide my surprise. I doubt Lorraine ever mentioned me to her co-workers. "Of course," Barrage smiles. "She said you were a successful businessman. Construction, if I remember correctly?" "Yes, I had a construction company," I answer, "but I sold it 10 years ago." "Modest." Lorraine scoops me up under her arm. "Grandpa built half the commercial buildings in downtown Lawndale. The River Plaza Shopping Center is his work." Barrage raises his eyebrows. "Impressive. So you have entrepreneurial talent in your blood." He nods at Lorraine. "You could say that," I smile, though I feel awkward at this sudden attention to my past accomplishments. "Grandpa, have you had anything to drink yet?" Lorraine asks. "We have some excellent champagne. I'd prefer a soda, if I may." "Of course." She looks around. "I have new guests to greet. Barrage, could you show my grandfather where the drinks are? I'll be right back." And she walks away, leaving me with Barrage. He leads me to the bar set up in the corner of the living room. "Lorraine is a very talented employee," he says, pouring me a soda. "One of the most promising in our agency." "I'm glad to hear that," I reply sincerely. Despite the difficult relationship, I've always wished my granddaughter success. "This house is impressive too." Barrage looks around the room. For a young professional to have such a property, an indicator of a serious attitude to life. Now I see what this is all about. Lorraine wants her bosses to think she bought the house herself, proof that she's successful and financially literate. I'm just a set piece to support the legend of the talented granddaughter of a successful businessman who followed in his footsteps. Yes, Lorraine has always been driven, I say neutrally. We talk for a few more minutes before Barrage apologizes and leaves to join the other guests. I'm left alone with my soda, watching the party from the sidelines. Lorraine shuttles between the guests, stopping here and there for a brief conversation or a laugh at someone's joke. She's in her element, confident, charming, easy to get along with all sorts of people. At this moment, I see myself in her in my youth, when I too could charm any client or partner in 5 minutes of conversation. But not once in the next hour does Lorraine approach me. She casts quick glances in my direction as if checking that I'm still here, but makes no attempt to engage me in conversation or introduce me to the other guests. I feel like an exhibit in a museum. I'm on display, but touching is not recommended. When dinner begins, a buffet of gourmet appetizers, I fill my plate and find a vacant seat in the corner of the living room. An older woman who introduces herself as Tabitha, Lorraine's neighbor, sits down next to me. "You're Lorraine's grandfather, right?" she asks, sipping champagne from a glass. "I've seen you a few times when you've come to help with the garden." "Yes, that's me," I answer with a smile. "You have a wonderful granddaughter," Tabitha says. "Always so polite. She says hello when we meet. Not like some young men these days." "Yeah, Lorraine knows how to make a good impression," I say. And there seems to be a hint of bitterness in my voice because Tabitha looks at me curiously. "You know," she says, lowering her voice, "when I was young, I didn't appreciate my old people either. I thought they were hopelessly out of touch, that their advice and experience were irrelevant to the modern world. And now that I'm old, I realize how wrong I was." I nod, not knowing what to say. "They'll understand," Tabitha continues. "Everyone does sooner or later. It just takes some people longer." "Maybe," I agree, though I doubt Lorraine will ever change her attitude toward me. All evening I feel like an outsider at this celebration of life. Lorraine is using me as a backdrop for her image as a successful heiress, and I'm letting her do it. Because somewhere deep down inside, I still hope that one day she'll see me not just as a purse and status, but as a person. But with every hour of this fake party, I realize more and more that it's never going to happen, and I'm going to have to accept it or make a change. The party was gaining momentum. After dinner, someone turned up the music louder, and the center of the living room turned into an impromptu dance floor. The young agency employees, liberated by the champagne and cocktails, started dancing. I watched from my corner, sipping my second soda of the evening and wondering when it would be appropriate to leave. Barrage, the creative director from London, was now standing surrounded by 5 or 6 young employees, including Lorraine, talking passionately and gesticulating vigorously. Judging by the bursts of laughter, the story was amusing. I noticed Lorraine casting quick glances in my direction, as if checking to make sure I was still there, but making no attempt to engage me in conversation. Tabitha, the elderly neighbor I'd spoken to earlier, had long since left said that at her age, late-night parties weren't for her anymore. I was the only person over 40 at the party, not counting Barrage, who looked to be in his early 50s. "You must be bored here." A young man I'd never met before suddenly appeared beside me. "I'm Rorik, working with Lorraine." "Winthrop Haddock," I held out my hand. "Lorraine's grandfather." "I know," he smiled. "Lorraine mentioned you were coming. Said you were a big shot in the construction business." "I used to be," I shrugged. "Now I'm just retired." "You're modest," Rorik sipped from his glass. "I've been here since the beginning, and I noticed that you're the only one Lorraine introduced to Barrage personally. She must be very proud of you." I remained silent, not knowing what to say. Was Lorraine proud of me? I doubt it. More likely, she's proud of the house I bought her and how it looks in the eyes of her superiors. This is the second act of our corporate play, Rorik continued with a slight chuckle. The first was a week ago, when Barrage first arrived. Today is the finale, when he decides who he'll promote. And who will he promote? I asked out of politeness. The odds are on Lorraine, Rorik shrugged. She's talented, no doubt, and she's very determined. Knows what she wants and knows how to get it. I caught a note in his voice, not envy, more like a tired irony, like he'd seen people like Lorraine get what they wanted, not always deservedly so. Our conversation was interrupted by Lorraine's loud voice. "Grandpa, come here!" I turned around. Lorraine was standing in the center of the room, next to Barrage and a few other colleagues. She beckoned to me with her hand as if beckoning a child. I apologized to Rorik and headed toward her, feeling the stares of the guests. "Barrage was just telling me about his grandfather," Lorraine said, taking my hand as I approached. "He was a builder too, can you believe it?" "Really?" I looked at Barrage. "Yes, he built several bridges in Scotland," Barrage nodded. "I've always admired people who build something real, tangible. Not like us ad men," he grinned. "We create illusions." "Don't be modest, Barrage," Lorraine touched his arm playfully. "Your campaigns change the perception of brands. It's an art form." I noticed how my granddaughter had changed around her superiors. Her voice was softer, her gestures smoother, a special, slightly ingratiating smile on her face. This was not the Lorraine I had known since childhood. Sharp, often impatient, straightforward. This new Lorraine was a calculating actress playing the role of the perfect employee. "Tell Barrage about that skyscraper you built in the 90s, Lorraine suggested. "The one with the unusual shape." "Crystal Tower," I nodded. It was an interesting project. 32 stories, glass facade with a special angle to maximize natural light. "Impressive." Burridge looked genuinely interested. "It must have required innovative engineering." I began to talk about the technical aspects of the project, how we'd addressed wind loading and structural stability. Burridge asked intelligent questions, showing a pretty good grasp of the topic. The rest of the agency listened with polite interest, although I could see that some were already bored. "Grandpa also likes to work in the garden," Lorraine suddenly interrupted me, as if she sensed I'd been the center of attention for too long. "He grows the most beautiful roses in Lundale." "Are you into gardening?" Barrage asked. "My wife likes to tinker with flowers, too." "It was my late wife's hobby," I replied. "After her death, I continued to tend the garden." "Oh," Barrage became serious at once. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I nodded. "It was 15 years ago." "My grandmother died when I was 14, Lorraine added with a sudden sadness in her voice that I thought was a little too feigned. She was an amazing woman. Lorraine rarely thought of her grandmother. As a teenager, she'd been too preoccupied with herself to notice Eleanor fading away. And after her death, as far as I could remember, Lorraine had mentioned her only a couple of times, and only in passing. "Nevertheless," Barrage went on, returning to the subject at hand, "what you've done in the construction industry is really impressive, Mr. Haddock. Lorraine said you started small and built a real empire." "I wouldn't call it an empire," I smiled. "But yes, I started with a crew of 5. When I sold the company, I had over 300 employees." "You see, Barrage," Lorraine took my arm again, "entrepreneurial spirit is in our blood. My grandfather always taught me to think big. I didn't remember ever teaching her to think big. Our conversations in recent years had been limited to discussing current affairs, and that was at the instigation of Isolde, who thought I should know what was going on in my granddaughter's life." "Speaking of big-picture thinking," Lorraine turned to her colleagues, "have you heard our idea for the global pharma campaign? We're proposing to completely rethink their approach to the marketplace." And she began to talk about some advertising project, instantly turning the attention to herself. I remained standing next to her, feeling like a used prop that was no longer needed in the scene. Gradually, the group began to discuss work matters and I stealthily stepped aside. No one paid attention except Rorik, who watched me from across the room with a slight chuckle. I decided it was time to leave. It was almost 11 p.m., and I had fulfilled my role as successful grandfather well enough. I started to look around for Lorraine to say goodbye and saw her standing at the bar, pouring herself another cocktail. "Lorraine," I walked over to her. "I have to go. Thanks for the invitation." "You're leaving already?" She looked a little disappointed, but not too disappointed. "But the party's just starting." "At my age, 11 p.m. is late," I smiled. "Besides, I can see you're having work-related conversations. I don't want to intrude." "You're never in the way, Grandpa." Lorraine hugged me. "Thanks for coming. Barrage was very impressed with you." "I'm glad," I replied. "He seems like a reasonable man." "The most reasonable in our agency," Lorraine confirmed. "Wait, I'll walk you out." We headed for the exit. A few guests nodded goodbye to me on the way out, but most were too engrossed in their own conversations to notice my departure. In the hallway, I started to put on my coat. Lorraine was standing nearby, rocking on her heels. The cocktails were clearly starting to take effect. "Did you call a cab?" she asked. "Not yet." I pulled out my cell phone. "I'll call one." "Don't." Lorraine took the phone out of my hand. "I'll have Rorik drive you. He was leaving early anyway." "There's no need to bother your colleague," I objected. "A cab would be more convenient." "Grandpa, don't be stubborn." Lorraine was already typing a message to someone on her phone. "Rorik lives near you. He's on his way." I sighed and agreed. A few minutes later, Rorik came into the hallway, already in his jacket and with the car keys in his hand. "Ready to go, Mr. Haddock?" he asked. "Yes, thank you," I nodded. "Rorik, you're a lifesaver," Lorraine smiled at him. "Grandpa doesn't know anything about cab apps at all." That wasn't true. I was perfectly capable of using such apps and did so regularly. But Lorraine apparently needed to emphasize my old-fashionedness even in such a trivial matter. "Don't worry, Mr. Haddock." Rorik opened the front door. "It's no problem for me." We stepped out onto the porch. The night air was cool and fresh after the stuffy atmosphere of the party. I took a deep breath, savoring the silence. "Grandpa, wait!" Lorraine suddenly jumped out behind us. "You forgot your scarf." She handed me an old woolen scarf which I had actually brought with me, though the evening wasn't cold enough to wear. "Thank you." I took the scarf. "God, Grandpa," Lorraine laughed suddenly, looking at me. "With that coat and that scarf, you look like a janitor." Her laughter sounded unexpectedly loud in the stillness of the night. I froze, not believing my ears. Rorik tensed beside me. "Seriously," Lorraine continued, not noticing my reaction, "that coat is how old? 20? 30? You could buy something more modern. With your money." At that moment the door behind her opened, and several other guests came out onto the porch. Barrage and a couple of young agency employees. They heard Lorraine's last words, and one of them laughed softly. "Lorraine," Barrage's voice sounded slightly reproachful, "you shouldn't talk about your grandfather like that." "Oh, come on," Lorraine said with a wave of her hand, clearly tipsy from the drink. "Grandpa doesn't take offense. Right, Grandpa?" She turned to me with a wide smile, but I couldn't bring myself to smile back. I stood with my scarf clutched tightly in my hand, looking at my granddaughter as if she were a complete stranger. "Yes, Barrage, you're right," I said at last in a calm voice. "You shouldn't talk about your grandfather like that, especially the one who bought you the house you're having this party in." Lorraine's smile faded slightly. "Grandpa, I was just kidding." She tried to hug me, but I pulled away. "Of course," I nodded. "Just kidding. Good night, Lorraine." I turned and walked to Rorik's car, feeling the stares of everyone there. Rorik quickly opened the passenger seat door for me, then walked around the car and got behind the wheel. "Mr. Haddock," he began as we pulled away from the house. "I apologize for Lorraine's behavior. It was Inappropriate. Not your fault, young man. I looked straight ahead. You had nothing to do with it. We spent the rest of the ride in silence. Rorik must have sensed my mood and didn't try to make conversation. When we got to my house, I just thanked him for the ride and got out of the car. At home, the first thing I did was pour myself a glass of whiskey, a small luxury I rarely allowed myself because of my heart problems. But today was a special occasion. I sat in my chair by the fireplace, turned on the floor lamp and stared at the fire, sipping my whiskey and thinking about what had happened. "You look like a janitor." Lorraine's words rang in my ears. It wasn't so much the words themselves that hurt me, after all. My coat was indeed old, albeit a quality, natural wool, custom-made coat from years ago. What hurt me was the tone in which she said it, contemptuous, condescending, and the fact that she did it publicly, in front of her co-workers, in front of her boss. I remembered when Lorraine had come to me 4 years ago asking me to help her with a down payment on a house. She had just gotten a promotion at the agency and wanted to invest in real estate. I suggested at the time that I not just give her money for the down payment, but buy the house outright and mortgage it to her. "Why do you need a mortgage?" I said at the time. "I have enough money to buy a house without a loan." Lorraine was thrilled. We went together to look at different options and finally settled on the same 3-story mansion in the north part of Londale. It cost almost £1 million, a considerable sum, even for me. But I wanted my granddaughter to have a good home to match her ambition and status. However, at the last minute, as we were signing the papers, I decided to register the house in my name rather than Lorraine's. It was an intuitive decision that I couldn't even explain to myself at the time. I just told her, "It's more secure this way. Legally, the house will be mine, but in fact, it will be yours. You'll live in it, use it, do whatever you want with it." Lorraine was a little disappointed, but quickly agreed. After all, she was getting a luxurious house without having to pay for it. Since then, I have faithfully paid property taxes, home insurance, and even some utilities. Lorraine lived there, threw parties, invited friends and co-workers over, bragging about her acquisition. I didn't mind. I wanted her to be happy. And now, after all I've done for her, she stands on the porch of this very house and tells me to my face that I look like a janitor, and she laughs, and her friends are laughing with her. I finished my whiskey and set the glass on the table. Suddenly I was overcome with a determination I hadn't felt in years. I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts. I found the number for Orton Bliss, my realtor who was helping me buy a house for Lorraine. It was late, almost midnight, but I texted him anyway. "Orton, I need to sell a house on the north side of Lawndale right away, the one we bought 4 years ago. Call me tomorrow morning." The reply came almost instantly. "Sure thing, Winthrop. I'll call you at 9 in the morning. Anything wrong?" "Just decided it's time to get rid of some assets. I'll talk to you tomorrow." I put the phone away and stared at the fire in the fireplace again. For the first time in a long time, I felt free, like I'd lifted a heavy weight off my shoulders that I'd been dragging around for years without realizing it. Yeah, I'm going to sell Lorraine's house. Not out of revenge, no, out of self-respect. Out of a need to show her and my entire family that I am not what they think I am, a convenient ATM machine, an old-fashioned old man to be used and then ridiculed. I am Winthrop Haddock, a man who built a successful company from the ground up, a man who has spent his life making difficult decisions and taking responsibility for them. And now I've made another decision, to no longer allow my family to disrespect me. Let Lorraine look for a new place to live. Let her co-workers and superiors explain to her why she had to move from a luxury mansion to an ordinary apartment. Let her realize that actions have consequences and disrespect for loved ones has a price. Orton Bliss called me at exactly 9 o'clock Sunday morning as promised. I was already awake. At my age, early rising is becoming a habit. I was having breakfast on the veranda, watching the first rays of sunlight break through the leaves of the trees in the garden. "Winthrop, good morning," Orton's voice sounded cheerful. "I got your message about selling the house. Are you serious?" "Absolutely," I replied, sipping my tea. "I want to sell it as soon as possible." "Is something wrong?" Orton sounded worried. "Money problems?" "No, nothing like that," I grinned. "I just want to get rid of this asset. Do you have any potential buyers?" "For a house in that neighborhood? There's always someone interested." Orton paused for a second. "But, Winthrop, are you sure? As I recall, your granddaughter lives there. What will happen to her?" "That's not my concern," I said calmly, but inside I felt a slight prick of conscience. I immediately pushed it away. "I'm not kicking her out on the street. She has a job, money, connections. She'll find a place to live." "I understand." Orton clearly didn't want to get involved in his client's family affairs. "When do you want to start the process?" "Immediately. Today, if possible." "Sunday?" Orton sounded surprised. "Okay, I can prepare the documents and send them to you for your signature, but the first viewings won't be until tomorrow at the earliest." "Oh, that's great. The sooner the better." "What about your granddaughter?" Orton asked again. "Will you warn her?" I thought for a moment. Should I tell Lorraine that I was selling the house? Part of me wanted to call her immediately, to explain the reasons for my decision, to give her time to prepare. But the other part, the part that still heard her laughing and saying, "You look like a janitor," wanted her to hear about the sale of the house from the new owners. "No," I finally answered. "I won't give notice." "Winthrop," Orton began. "Orton," I interrupted him, "I appreciate your concern, but this is my decision. I own the house. I can use it however I want. Just do your job, okay?" "Sure." Orton immediately became businesslike. "I'll contact you as soon as I find potential buyers." After the conversation, I spent the rest of the morning going over the deeds to the house I kept in my office. Everything was in order. The house was indeed deeded to me, with no legal obligation to Lorraine. I could sell it at any time without her consent. This realization brought a strange satisfaction. I had always been a man who kept his word and kept his promises. But I had never promised Lorraine that the house would be hers forever. I had only allowed her to live there, to use it as her own. And now I was taking back that permission. By noon, Orton had sent me electronic documents to sign the preliminary contract with the real estate agency. I signed them and sent them back without hesitation. The deed was done. The sales process was set in motion. All day I waited for a call from Lorraine, thinking that Orton or someone in his office might talk, let her know about the impending sale. But the phone was silent. That evening I turned on the TV, trying to distract myself, but my thoughts kept returning to last night, to Lorraine's words, to the laughter of her co-workers. When I woke up on Monday, I found a message from Orton. "Winthrop, I have 2 potential buyers who want to see the house today. The Penhallow couple are successful entrepreneurs and are looking for a home in that exact neighborhood. They're willing to pay full price without bargaining if they like the house. The second option is an investor, Frederick Heaton, who is looking for a rental property." "What do you say?" I answered immediately. "Show both of them. Priority to the one who closes the deal faster." "Got it. I'll schedule the viewings for today. Will you be in attendance?" "No, you can handle it." I knew Lorraine usually worked Mondays from 9 to 6. The house would be empty. Orton could show it quietly to potential buyers. But at 11 in the morning, my phone rang. Lorraine's name popped up on the screen. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the conversation, and answered. "Grandpa!" Lorraine's voice sounded outraged and surprised at the same time. "What's going on? What are you talking about?" I decided not to make it easy for her. "Some people with a realtor just showed up at my house. They say the house is for sale and they're potential buyers. Is there some kind of mistake?" "No, Lorraine, it's not a mistake," I replied calmly. I'm really selling the house. There was a pause on the other end of the line. You're selling my house? Her voice became quieter with a hint of incredulity. Why? What's wrong? It's not your house, Lorraine. I kept my composure. It belongs to me, and I've decided to sell it. But, you said I could live here. There was a note of panic in her voice. You said it was mine. I said you could use it as your own, but legally it's always been mine, and I'm free to use my property as I please. Grandfather, please. Lorraine's tone changed dramatically, pleading. Let's talk about this. You can't just sell the house without telling me. Where would I go? You're a grown woman with a good job, I replied. I'm sure you'll find somewhere to live. This is about last night, isn't it? Lorraine suddenly realized the reason. Because of what I said about your coat? Grandpa, I was drunk. I didn't mean to offend you. It was a stupid joke. It wasn't just about last night, Lorraine, I sighed. It was the last straw. For years, you and your parents have treated me like an ATM or an inconvenient old man to be put up with. I was tired of it. That's not true, Lorraine exclaimed. We love you. I love you, Grandpa. You do? I grinned involuntarily. It's strange that you only remembered this love now that I've decided to sell the house. It's not fair. Her voice was filled with tears now. I don't deserve to be treated like this because of one stupid joke. Again, it's not just that joke. I could feel the irritation building up inside. It was the last straw in a long line of disrespectful behavior. I'm sorry, but my decision is final. The house will be sold. I'm going to tell my mom. Lorraine suddenly changed tactics, turning to threats like when she was a child. She'll be furious. I'm sure she would, I agreed. You can tell her that I'm willing to discuss the situation if she wants to. You're going to regret this, Grandpa. Lorraine's last words sounded like a warning before she hung up. I set the phone aside and rubbed my temples. The conversation went about as I expected. First, shock and disbelief, then pleading, and finally threats. Classic stages of realizing loss. Not an hour later, Isolde called. I was ready for it. Daddy, what the hell is going on? Her voice was literally vibrating with anger. Lorraine called me hysterical. Are you really selling her house? Hello, Isolde. I deliberately started the conversation calmly. Yes, I'm selling the house that I own and in which Lorraine lives. You can't do that, Isolde was almost shouting. You promised her this house. No, I didn't promise her. I remained calm. I said she could live there, but the house was always registered to me, and now I've decided to sell it. Why? Isolde asked demandingly. What had she done wrong? It's not about what she did, I sighed. Or rather, it's not just about that. It's about attitude yours, Lorraine's, Lloyd's. You've treated me for years as a convenient source of money, but not as a person deserving of respect. That's absurd, Isolde snorted. We've always respected you, have we? I couldn't contain the irony. Then why do you only call me when you need something? Why did Lorraine only invite me to the party to impress her boss? Why hasn't your husband in 27 years ever started calling me Dad? You're being unfair. Isolde's voice trembled slightly. We all have our own lives, our own problems. We can't be around you all the time. I'm not asking to be around you all the time, I replied. I'm asking for basic respect, but apparently even that's too much. Is that why you've decided to throw your own granddaughter out on the street? Isolde went on the offensive again. Is this your revenge for not calling you often enough? I'm not kicking anyone out. I was beginning to lose my patience. Lorraine is a grown woman with a good job. She can rent an apartment like millions of other people her age do. Do you know how much rent is in Lawndale now? Isolde wouldn't give up. She could barely afford a tiny studio on the outskirts. That's not my problem, I replied firmly. I've given her 4 years of free rent in a luxury house. That's more than enough. You're a cruel, selfish old man, Isolde blurted out. Mother would be ashamed of you. These words hit harder than I expected. Eleanor had always been the peacemaker in our family, softening corners and smoothing over conflicts. What would she say now? Would she support my decision or side with my granddaughter? Perhaps, I finally said, but she would also be ashamed of the way you've treated me. Isolde was silent for a few seconds. We're coming to see you tonight, she finally said. Me, Lloyd, and Lorraine. We need to discuss this in person. Okay, I agreed. Be there by 7. After talking to Isolde, I felt tired. The emotional strain of the last 2 days was taking its toll. I decided to rest before the evening meeting with my family, which promised to be difficult. At 6 o'clock, Orton called. Winthrop, I have great news, he sounded excited. The Penhallows are ready to buy the house. They're offering full price plus 15% on top if we close the deal within a week. Sounds good, I replied. When do they want to move in? Here's the thing. They want to move in as soon as possible. Ideally in 2 weeks, I wondered. 2 weeks wasn't a lot of time for Lorraine to find a new place to live and move in. On the other hand, Penhallow's offer was more than generous. And given the circumstances, a quick end to this whole situation was probably for the best. Okay, I decided. I accept their offer. Get the paperwork ready. Great, Orton sounded pleased. I'll contact their lawyer today. By the way, your granddaughter was very, emotional during the screening. Is she okay? She'll get over it, I answered succinctly. Thanks for your work, Orton. At 7 p.m., right on schedule, the doorbell rang. I opened it and saw Isolde, Lloyd, and Lorraine standing on the doorstep with frowning faces. Lorraine looked like she'd been crying eyes red, makeup slightly smudged. Come in, I stepped aside, letting them into the house. They walked into the living room in silence. Isolde sat down on the couch, Lloyd taking the chair next to her. Lorraine remained standing with her arms crossed over her chest. So, I began once everyone was settled, you wanted to talk. Dad, Isolde got straight to the point. You have to cancel the sale of the house. It's not fair to Lorraine. I don't have to do anything like that, I replied calmly. The house belongs to me, and I'm free to use it as I please. Grandfather, please, Lorraine stepped forward, her voice trembling. I apologize for what I said at the party. I was stupid and tactless, but that's no reason to deprive me of my home. I'm not depriving you of your home, Lorraine, I replied. I'm just selling my property. You never had any rights to the house, only the privilege of living there. That's semantics, Lloyd intervened, raising his voice for the first time that evening. You've made it clear to her that the house is effectively hers. She furnished it, invested money and emotion in it. And I let her live there for free for 4 years, I reminded her. Most people her age spend half their paycheck on rent much more modestly. But why now? Isolde asked. What's changed? My patience has changed, I answered, looking her in the eye. For years I have tolerated your neglect. I gave you money, bought houses, paid for your education, travels, repairs. And what do I get in return? Rare phone calls when you need something, condescending smiles, obligatory visits on holidays, and now public humiliation. It was a joke, Lorraine almost cried. A stupid, inappropriate joke. I didn't mean to offend you. It's not just the joke, I shook my head. It's about the general attitude. You all see me as a source of money, not as a person deserving of respect, and I'm tired of it. It's not fair. Isolde looked genuinely upset. We love you, Dad. Yeah, maybe we don't show it the way you'd like, but it's true. Love shows itself in actions, Isolde, I sighed. And your actions say differently. So this is revenge? Lloyd asked, stepping forward. You're selling the Lorraine house to punish us all? No, Lloyd, I looked at my son-in-law. This isn't revenge. It's a lesson, and frankly, a defense of my own dignity. I've let you disrespect me for too long. It's time to end it. How long will this lesson last. Isolde used her fingers to indicate quotation marks. When will you give Lorraine her house back? I'm not giving her the house back, I answered firmly. The house will be sold. The deal will be closed within a week. The new owners will move in 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Lorraine exclaimed. Are you kidding me? I can't find a new place and move in 2 weeks. I'm sure you can if you try, I said. At least you can stay with your parents while you look for an apartment. Lorraine turned to Isolde looking for support. She nodded. Of course you can stay with us. I'm 29 years old. Lorraine fluttered her arms. I don't want to go back to my parents. Then get an apartment, I said, or a dorm room, or stay with friends. You have options, Lorraine. You're ruining my life. She raised her voice. What am I going to say at work? That my own grandfather kicked me out of the house? You can tell the truth, I shrugged. That you never owned the house. That you just lived there for free thanks to the generosity of a grandfather you publicly ridiculed. Lorraine turned away, wiping away her tears. Daddy, Isolde tried to change tactics. Think about what you're doing. You're destroying your relationship with your own family over some stupid grudge. No, Isolde, I shook my head. You're the one who ruined our relationship for years. Little disrespectful acts, dismissive words, forgetfulness. I just finally reacted. What do you want? Lloyd asked me bluntly. Money? We can buy the house. How much are you asking for it? It's not about the money, Lloyd. I looked him in the eye. It's never been about them. It's about respect. It's about how you treat me. And frankly, I'm not sure you're capable of changing that. So, you're just cutting us out of your life? Isolde looked both angry and scared. Your own family. No, I shook my head. I'm simply ceasing to be your ATM. If you want a real relationship with me, one based on mutual respect, not financial dependence, I'm open to that. But I will no longer tolerate disrespect just because you're my family. A heavy silence hung in the room. Lorraine was crying quietly in the corner. Isolde stared at the floor, clasping her hands in her lap. Lloyd leaned back in his chair, his face a mixture of anger and confusion. I can't believe you're doing this to us, Isolde finally said, after all we've been through together. And I can't believe that you treated me the way you did for years, I replied, and thought it was normal. Let's go. Lloyd stood up suddenly. We're not getting anywhere tonight. He won't change his mind. Isolde hesitated for a second, but then rose as well. Lorraine, come on, she called to her daughter. We'll talk about this at home. Lorraine wiped away her tears and headed for the door without looking at me. Isolde and Lloyd followed her. At the door, Isolde turned around. You're going to regret this, Daddy, she said quietly. Maybe not now, but someday you'll realize what a mistake you made. Maybe, I agreed. But right now I feel like I'm doing the right thing. They left, and the house fell into silence. I went back to the living room and sat in my chair, feeling a strange mixture of emotions, sadness, relief, determination. I knew I had ruined something important today, but I also knew that this something had long needed to be destroyed so that something healthier and more honest could grow in its place. The phone rang, interrupting my musings. It was Orton. Winthrop, the papers are ready, he said. The Penhallows have already signed their part. Their lawyer suggests we meet tomorrow at 11 in my office to finalize the deal. Will you be able to make it? Yes, I will, I replied. Thanks, Orton. It had been a month since I'd sold the Lorraine house. The Penhallows were a pleasant middle-aged couple, he a financial analyst, she a literature professor. They were thrilled with the house and paid even more than they had originally offered, just to close the deal as quickly as possible. Lorraine moved out the day before the Penhallows were due to move in. She didn't contact me directly. All communication went through Orton. He said she was emotional, but she held her own. Well, at least she didn't scandalize the new owners. Isolde and Lloyd stopped communicating with me, too. The last time Isolde called me was the day before the deal closed. She tried to convince me to change my mind, offered some compromises, to give Lorraine more time to look for a place to live, to help her with the down payment for the new apartment, etc. But I remained adamant. The deal was closed, the money was transferred to my account, and the keys were handed over to the new owners. For the first few days afterward, I felt a strange emptiness. Despite all the hurt, my family had been a big part of my life. Now there was a gap that needed to be filled with something. I decided to start small, with things I had always wanted to do, but had put off due to various commitments to my family. The first thing I did was sign up for a watercolor painting class at the local community center. Eleanor had always said I had artistic talent, but I had never taken the time to develop it. Now I did. Classes were held twice a week, on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The group consisted mainly of retired people like myself, although there were a few younger participants. Our instructor, Gwyneth Collins, was an energetic woman in her 60s with gray in her short hair and wonderfully lively eyes. She was so enthusiastic about painting that it was impossible not to be infected by her passion. "Winthrop, you definitely have potential," she told me after my third class, looking at my modest landscape. "You have a good sense of composition. You just need to work on your technique a little." I was surprised and delighted by this praise. It had been a long time since anyone had said anything like that to me. In my family, my achievements were taken for granted, and new endeavors were often ridiculed as old man's quirks. I met several interesting people in the class. I especially enjoyed talking to Rachel Norton, a widow about my age who used to work as an architect. We found many common topics of conversation, from building technology to classical music, which we both loved. After the fourth class, Rachel suggested, "Winthrop, would you like to join us on Saturday? Several people from the group are going to Riverside Park for a plein air painting session. There will be a picnic and some outdoor painting." I agreed without hesitation. My social calendar was completely empty, and the prospect of spending time in pleasant company seemed enticing. Saturday was surprisingly warm for early fall. I arrived at the park around 10 in the morning and found our small group by the duck pond. Rachel waved at me, inviting me to join. "We were just discussing which angle to choose," she said as I approached. "I thought the view of the bridge and the old willows would be a great subject." I agreed, and we all settled into the folding chairs Gwyneth had thoughtfully brought. The next 2 hours passed in pleasant silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves, the quacking of ducks, and occasional comments about technique or lighting. It was peaceful. I couldn't remember the last time I felt such peace and contentment from a simple activity. No drama, no demands, no ulterior motives. Just a group of people enjoying art and nature. After painting, there was a picnic. Everyone brought something to the communal table. I bought a bottle of good wine and a cheese plate from the deli. Rachel made homemade quiche, which was delicious. "You're a great cook," I told her as I tasted the second piece. "Thank you," she smiled. "When you live alone, you have to learn to cook for yourself or the meals become too monotonous." "It's a familiar problem," I nodded. After my wife died, I'd been eating only what I could heat up quickly for a long time. "And now?" "I've learned to cook a few simple meals," I shrugged. "Nothing fancy, but no more canned food." "Maybe we could swap recipes," Rachel suggested. "I have some great options for single people. Simple, but delicious." "I'd love to," I agreed. After the picnic, Gwyneth invited everyone to show their work and discuss it. I was surprised at how differently we all depicted the same landscape. My watercolor was more structured with clear lines, a result of my engineering experience. Rachel's work had a great sense of space. You could see her architectural background. Gwyneth's watercolor was the most emotional, with bright colors and bold strokes. "Art is a way of showing how we see the world," Gwyneth said as we looked at the works, "and everyone sees it differently." That thought stayed with me for a long time. I did see the world differently than my family. For them, it was all about status, the trappings of success, the opinion of others. For me, Honesty, hard work, and respect for others were always more important. Maybe that's why it was so difficult for us to understand each other. In the evening, when I got home, I checked my email for the first time in many days. Among other emails was one from Murray, my old friend and former CFO of the company. "Winthrop, long time no talk. How are you? Heard from Evelyn, remember she works at the same agency as your granddaughter's co-worker, that there's some trouble in your family. If you need to talk, I'm always on the phone. By the way, the folks from the former management team and I are getting together next Friday at the Old Anchor. It would be great if you could join us." I was touched by this invitation. Since the sale of the company, I had kept in touch with only a few former colleagues, and Murray was one of them. Determined not to be put off, I immediately replied, "Thanks for the invitation. I'd love to join. Yes, my family and I are going through a difficult time, but I'm coping. I'll tell you when I meet you." I then went through the rest of the mail. Among the letters was an automatic notification from the bank that a monthly payment of £2,000 could not be made due to insufficient funds in the recipient's account. This was a payment to Isolde and Lloyd, help with the mortgage as we called it, although really I was just giving them money each month. I had set up this automatic payment years ago and had almost forgotten about it. Apparently, Isolde closed the account the money was going into. Interesting. That meant they had decided to completely sever financial ties with me. On the one hand, it was a mature decision. On the other, I couldn't help but wonder how they would cope without my help. The mortgage on their house was substantial, and Lloyd's salary, while decent, didn't allow for the kind of living on the largesse they were used to. Well, that was their choice. I stopped feeling responsible for the financial well-being of my adult daughter and her husband. If they decided that pride was more important than money, that's their right. The next day, I called my financial advisor, Oliver Pratt, and asked for a meeting. We needed to review my investment portfolio, given my changed circumstances. "Winthrop, it's good to hear from you." Oliver was always energetic despite his 65 years. "Sure, let's meet. How about tomorrow morning?" I agreed, and the next day I arrived at his office in downtown Lundale. Oliver greeted me with his usual cordiality. "So," he said as we settled into his office with cups of coffee, "what brings you to me?" "I need to review my financial plan," I replied. "There has been a change in my life. I no longer support my family financially." Oliver raised his eyebrows. "Serious changes. What happened, if it's no secret?" I briefly told him about the situation with Lorraine, the sale of the house, and the breakup with my family. "I understand." Oliver nodded when I was done. "That really makes a difference. How much did you spend on family support each month?" "About £5,000, I answered. $2,000 to Isolde and Lloyd, 1.5 to Lorraine, plus various unplanned expenses. It's a considerable sum. Oliver started typing something on his computer. "Now that those expenses are eliminated, you have a lot more financial freedom, plus the proceeds from the sale of the house. Have you decided what you're going to do with that money?" "Partially," I nodded. "I want to increase my charitable contributions. There are several funds I'm interested in. Help for young entrepreneurs, scholarships for engineering students. I'm also thinking about traveling. I've always wanted to see Japan and New Zealand." "Great ideas," Oliver smiled. "Let's see how we can structure your investments to provide for both current expenses and future plans." We spent 2 hours discussing different investment strategies and financial products. In the end, I decided to set up several trusts for charitable purposes, increase my investments in conservative funds to provide a steady income, and set aside a separate travel fund to fulfill my long-held dreams. "You know, Winthrop," Oliver said as we were finishing up, "many of my clients are starting a new chapter in their lives at your age. Some after retirement, some after the loss of a spouse, some after a family breakup like yours. And often this new chapter turns out to be unexpectedly fulfilling and happy. I hope it will be the same for me," I smiled. I'm sure it will be. Oliver shook my hand. You've always been a man who knows what he wants and knows how to get it. After my meeting with Oliver, I decided to take a walk around downtown Lundale. The day was clear, and I enjoyed the simple pleasure of a leisurely stroll with no particular goal in mind. I stopped by a bookstore where I bought a few books on watercolor painting and a new novel by an author Rachel had recommended, then sat in a small cafe, people watching and reflecting on my new life. Another 2 weeks went by. I continued to take painting classes, started going to the local jazz club, and began spending more time in the garden. One day, on my way back from the grocery store, I met Rorik, the same Lorraine colleague who had driven me home after the ill-fated party. "Mr. Haddock." He spotted me first and came over. "How are you?" "Not bad, thank you," I replied, surprised to see him. "And you?" "I'm fine," Rorik smiled. "I'm actually working at another agency now. I got a promotion." "Congratulations," I said sincerely. "And how are things at the old agency?" I didn't dare to ask about Lorraine. "It's fine." Rorik seemed to understand my unspoken question. Barrage had indeed given Lorraine the promotion she dreamed of, but from what I'd heard, she'd had to make some serious lifestyle changes. She moved into a small apartment somewhere in the suburbs and now commutes to work by bus instead of her BMW. So, I tried to keep a neutral expression on my face. "Well, life is full of changes." "That's true," Rorik nodded. "By the way, I don't know if I should tell you this, but Lorraine didn't tell anyone the truth about why she had to move. She said she decided to simplify her life and focus on her career rather than material possessions." I couldn't hold back a short laugh. It was so typical of Lorraine to turn an unpleasant situation into part of some inspirational story about herself. "Well, if it helps her deal with the situation," I said, "then so be it." "I guess so," Rorik shrugged. "Anyway, I'm glad you're doing well, Mr. Haddock. I have to run. I have a meeting with a client in 20 minutes. We said goodbye, and I continued on my way home, thinking about what I'd learned. So Lorraine had gotten her promotion after all, and found a way to save face in front of her co-workers by presenting the forced move as a conscious decision. Clever, and typical of her. I didn't gloat at the thought of her having to give up her lavish lifestyle, but there was a certain satisfaction in the fact that she was now living within her means, like most people her age. Maybe it would teach her to appreciate what she had and not take other people's generosity for granted. The following Friday, as promised, I went to meet up with former colleagues at the Old Anchor pub. It was good to see familiar faces, to hear how their lives had turned out after the sale of the company. Some went on to work for the new corporation. Some, like me, retired. Some started their own businesses. "And how is your granddaughter?" Murray asked when it was just the two of us at the table. Evelyn said she'd moved into some tiny apartment. What happened? I told him the whole story, the party, the humiliation, my decision to sell the house, and the subsequent breakup with my family. "I knew you'd do it someday." Murray shook his head, but there was approval in his eyes. "They've taken advantage of your kindness for too long." "Maybe I've acted too harshly," I admitted. "Sometimes I wake up in the night and wonder if I've gone too far." "Listen, Winthrop," Murray leaned across the table to me. "I've known you for over 30 years. You're the most generous man I've ever met. You've given your family everything you could and more. If they couldn't appreciate that and treated you disrespectfully, the problem is with them, not you." His words helped me deal with the doubts that sometimes arose in the quiet hours of the night. My decision may have been harsh, but it was necessary. For me, and ultimately, for them too. Another 2 weeks passed. I continued to settle into my new life, taking painting classes, meeting new friends, planning a trip to Japan next spring. My home, which had often seemed too big and empty before, was now a cozy retreat where I could do the things I really enjoyed. One day, while sorting through the mail, I discovered a postcard with no return address. Inside was a simple text. I miss our conversations about roses, L. It was the first word from Lorraine in almost 2 months. I stared at that postcard for a long time, not knowing how to react. Part of me wanted to call her immediately, to offer to meet, to try to repair the relationship. The other part reminded me of the years of neglect, of the public humiliation, of how easily she'd taken my generosity. In the end, I just put the card in my desk drawer. Maybe I'll respond later, or maybe I won't. It would depend on whether her message was sincere or just another attempt at manipulation. But one thing I knew for sure, I would no longer allow anyone, not even my family, to disrespect me. I deserved better. And now I was finally starting to get it. Respect from new friends, satisfaction from new hobbies, peace of mind from living life on my own terms. My new life was just beginning. And despite all the challenges and losses, I was ready to face it with an open heart and a clear mind. After all, at 78, I had finally learned the most important thing, to value myself as I had always valued others.